So there's a very interesting report that is coming out here that apparently Tom Brady has very high hopes for quarterback Cam Miller. Yes, the quarterback that the Las Vegas Raiders drafted in the 6th round. Apparently Tom Brady really likes this guy. We have a report coming out by The Athletic. And in this report, they're basically saying that John Spytek said this about what Tom Brady had to say about Cam Miller. So apparently Tom Brady really liked the way that Cam Miller threw the football. He really liked his technique, he throwing from the ground up and his motion. And then, of course, Tom Brady thought that Cam Miller had the potential to continue to improve. When you think about the Raiders roster right now, we're going to go all in with Geno Smith. At some point, we're going to move off of Geno, right? He's 35 years old. He'll be here for about 2 to 3 years. It will be interesting to see if Cam Miller's the guy for the Raiders or if Tom Brady says, hey, I think this quarterback could be that next quarterback. Another thing that happened earlier today, if you guys did not know, is Tom Brady actually went onto a podcast. And on that podcast, he made it known, right? He cleared the air and said, hey, I had absolutely zero input in terms of evaluation, in terms of, telling the Raiders to pick player A or pick player B. He goes, I did not have any of that input. No one even asked my input on that. And that's just kind of how it is, right? John Spytek is 100% in charge, which, keeping in mind, is actually different than what John Spytek's telling us, right? John Spytek's telling us that not that Tom Brady said to draft this guy, but Tom Brady said this guy has a ton of upside, he has a ton of potential. And again, it's two kind of different reports, right? But with that, also do kind of keep in mind, John Spytek values what Tom Brady had to say, right? For him to say that this is what Tom Brady told me, he didn't tell me to draft this guy, he just told me his evaluation of this guy. We watched this tape, kind of agree, so we took this guy. Right, it will be interesting to see what this guy can kind of develop into. And I want to just go ahead and take a step back and also just kind of talk a little bit about one of the trends that I think we're seeing in the NFL that we weren't seeing in past years. Some teams started to do it, and I think most teams have started to catch on at this point. 4 years ago, if there were 8 quarterbacks coming out, 5 of them had upside traits, potential, they would have all went in the first round. Top 15 picks, you'd get all these quarterbacks. Today, that's not happening anymore, right? When Hendon Hooker was coming out, people were like, this guy could be a top 5 pick. He has all the traits. He has all the tools. And although some teams might have taken him as a top 5 pick, teams have kind of realized that it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to take a quarterback with potential high in the top 10, right? Because you're going to miss out on those blue chip prospects like Ashton Genty. And teams are actually kind of taking this approach now where instead of going all in and trying to get that quarterback in the top 10, get a developmental quarterback and see what a guy can kind of develop into. Right? Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield are examples of quarterbacks where they weren't that good early on, but then they developed into good quarterbacks. Sam Darnold, we're kind of seeing him, going through the same process. There's a chance that teams can say, hey, we took Dak Prescott in the 4th round. He developed into a 10, 15-year starter in the NFL. Tom Brady, greatest quarterback ever, was a 6th round pick. He developed and became the greatest quarterback of all time. And even more recently, like Derek Carr was a 2nd round pick. Jalen Hurts was a 2nd round pick. You even had a quarterback like Brock Purdy who, just a couple years ago was a 7th round pick. And these guys all developed into starting caliber quarterbacks. I think teams are starting to recognize that you could find quarterbacks to start as long as you draft based off of traits. You can find quarterbacks that could eventually one day be starters. And I think in this class, we saw multiple guys kind of fit that same mold. Obviously, the Browns took 2 quarterbacks, not in the top 2 rounds, right? They took Dylan Gabriel late in the 3rd round, and then they also took Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round. You also got a team like the Raiders took Cam Miller, and apparently Tom Brady signed off. Really likes the pick. There's a couple other teams that took quarterbacks as well, right? The Eagles took Will Howard, and I know the Eagles have Jalen Hurts under contract, but the Eagles could keep Hurts for another 3 to 5 years and then eventually pass it off to Will Howard. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen. Never say never, right? We don't really know if the Eagles want to continue to pay Jalen Hurts long term or if they decide, hey, just like Carson Wentz, just like Nick Foles, we have the greatest general manager in the NFL. We can, find a quarterback to fit our scheme, right? The Miami Dolphins, Quinn Ewers, they took him in the 7th round. There's a real chance Quinn Ewers starts for the Dolphins at some point. To me, I feel like teams are starting to recognize that you can take quarterbacks with traits. And you can take them later on and they might be able to develop. Now, it doesn't always work, right? You're not going to be 100 for 100, right? We took Aiden O'Connell. He had some traits, never really worked out. And now the Raiders, I feel like, are shifting focus to Cam Miller, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the traits that this guy has. Now, I don't want to do an entire film breakdown. I will do one tomorrow, maybe the day after, we'll see. But one of the things I noticed with Cam Miller right away is this guy reads coverage fairly well, right? There's one play specifically against Colorado that stood out to me. The safety ends up rotating to the left, right? He starts backpedaling as soon as the ball gets snapped. He starts going to the left. The quarterback's looking directly over there, recognizes it, and you can see his head go from left, and then he starts to slowly make those reads to the inside. And he reads the linebacker in like that second or third area of the read. And then he fits the ball, and he has a two-man read, high-low. He fits the ball in perfectly, right? And there's multiple plays like this with Cam Miller where this guy just reads kind of what's out there. And I'm not saying this guy's like Peyton Manning or Tom Brady in terms of recognizing coverage, but when the ball snapped and this guy has the ball in his hands, he does a really good job processing from the time he has the ball in his hands. Now, can he recognize coverage early enough, right, pre-snap? I don't know, right? That's not for me to really know. I think a coach is more likely to be able to figure that out. Does this guy have the arm strength to drive the football? He lacks it sometimes, right? But again, these are things that you can kind of improve on, you can get better at. Maybe you get better in terms of the timing and potentially anticipating a pass as well, right? These are coaching elements, though. One of the things, of course, for me that I see is this guy does do a good job reading coverage. And, just kind of taking a step back, I think the one trait that every quarterback just has to have success is you got to be able to create. And I think with Cam Miller, that's the first thing you're going to see right away, right? The rushing stats don't lie, right? This guy sometimes takes off running and he's hitting it for like 40, 50 yards. I think if it's a quarterback that can't create, unless you have Sean McVay, unless you have Ben Johnson, it's going to be very, very hard to have success. And of course, you can still find success with those quarterbacks, but then you also might need, a Jamar Chase or a T. Higgins type of wide receiver as well. So unless you have an elite offensive play design, right, or head coach or offense coordinator, maybe elite weapons, it's hard to have success in the NFL in today's era, right? I think one of the things that people sometimes overlook with today's NFL is we have so many great defensive linemen in the NFL. In fact, I think there's more talent, just generally, speaking among NFL teams. There's more talent today on the defensive line than in any era of football in the past, right? And I think with that, quarterbacks also have to be able to create because of that, right? You get these defensive linemen that are getting home so quickly. If you can't run away from pressure, you're not going to have success. And I'll give you guys another example of why it's important to be able to create with your legs. In 1999 or sometime around that point, right? Bill Belichick started doing this thing that kind of started revolutionizing football. Right? Bill Belichick would put 5 guys on the line of scrimmage, and 4 guys would come, and then 1 guy drops back. But by putting 5 guys on the line of scrimmage, what ends up happening is the offensive line, the 5 guys have to decide which 5 are blocking, which way guys are sliding, right? And then another thing he started to do, is very, very similar concept, is he put 4 guys on the line of scrimmage, 1 defensive end drops off, and then a slot corner comes off the other side, or maybe it's a linebacker off the other side. All right, it's called simulated pressure. Right? That's what they call it in today's NFL. Basically, a simulated pressure is pre-snap as a offensive line. You're going to call it out. Hey, left tackle has this guy, left guard has this guy, the slides to the left, right tackle, you have this guy, right? And when the left tackle's assigned to a defensive end and that defensive end drops off, and no one's assigned to that slot corner that's coming off the edge, so you're only bringing 4 guys, right? Because out of the 4 defensive linemen, 1 drops off. So you're only bringing 4 guys. You still got the same amount of guys in coverage, or you still got 7 guys in coverage. What happens now is, as a quarterback, is you're essentially getting blitzed, but there's only 4 guys coming. No one's assigned to that slot corner, right? So now you have to figure out, you either got to get the ball out quickly, or you got to create a play, right? You got to make that guy miss. And that's some of what happens in today's NFL, right? You get other coaches out there. We've seen Brian Flores do this a lot, where they'll use that double A-mug look, right? They'll put like 6, 7 guys on the line of scrimmage. Both linebackers step up into the A-gaps. 1 guy comes, 1 guy drops off, but it's like quick, right? You got to get the ball out, or you got to create. If you can't create, I think you're not going to be able to have success in today's NFL. And I think Aiden O'Connell's an example of this, right? He's a quarterback who, when you do blitz him, yeah, he'll throw up a 50-50 pass, but if he doesn't, he'll take a hit. And he ends up getting knocked out. He ends up missing some time or whatever ends up happening. And I think this is the very, very bare minimum every quarterback has to do, right? What separates quarterbacks is going to be the processing. It's going to be recognizing coverage, reading coverage. How comfortable are they with changing the play call? How comfortable are they with the offensive scheme, right? If a guy blitzes, you know what you got to kind of do. If you don't have the ability to change up the play call, Cam Miller has potential, right? I think there's definitely traits on tape that I like, and we'll see if it actually pans out for the Raiders. Chances are it's probably not going to, right? Let's just be 100% honest. Most of the time when you have a quarterback, especially a guy that's not a top 10 pick, most of the time it doesn't work out. And even then, most top 10 picks don't really work out either. But again, I do think that we're entering a new era of football where teams are no longer going to draft quarterbacks high. I think we're about to get to the point where every team already has a quarterback, and the 4 teams that are kind of up in the air might invest in Cam Miller or Quinn Ewers or Shedeur Sanders. And if you have the 9th overall pick, why trade 3 first-round picks to get up to number 1 to take that quarterback, right? Just stick with the guys you kind of have. Maybe find a veteran, right? We also have a lot of veteran quarterbacks that come available. I think we're getting to the point where teams are being a lot smarter with these decisions. But we'll see if that actually ends up holding true, right? What I'm saying right now is not something that's actually been proven, but we'll see as we kind of go forward. So with that being stated, let me know what you guys think, man. What are you guys' thoughts on Cam Miller? Do you guys like that Tom Brady signed off on this guy essentially, right? Tom Brady has high hopes for Cam Miller. What are you guys' thoughts on this? Let me know in the comments below what you guys think. Thumbs up, subscribe if you guys are not subscribed, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.